I never used to be like this, yearning for warmth, craving someone so intensely that my thoughts became clouded. But what else could be expected of someone who had felt hollow for so long? It was inevitable, but not like this. Not with him, not with Daniel. The first time was an accident, a very pleasant accident. Though Daniel had always looked at me with those deep, lingering eyes, flexing his sculpted arms around the house and offering help whenever my husband was away, I never attributed any meaning to it. He was, after all, my husband's closest friend, practically family. Nothing should have happened. But Daniel wanted more. I had caught his lingering glances before, the way his gaze followed me like a child's eyes fixed on a coveted toy in a shop window. He wanted me, and he didn't care that I was someone else's. It was a cold Saturday morning when it all began. My husband Ethan had left early for work as usual, leaving me alone with Daniel. The night before had been both agonizing and frustrating. Ethan had returned home exhausted and, once again, brushed off my advances, choosing sleep over me. I had worn the satin slip dress he once adored, my lips painted in a shade he used to call irresistible, my eyes filled with unspoken desires. But he had merely sighed, pleading for rest. It was the 6th time, and before I could protest, his quiet snores filled the space between us. The weather outside was unforgiving, and inside I felt the sharp bite of loneliness. I told myself I could never betray Ethan, but doubt gnawed at the back of my mind. Was he already doing the same to me? Shaking off the thoughts, I climbed out of bed and resolved to start my morning chores. Still dressed in the black nightgown from the night before, I adjusted the thermostat and asked Alexa to play "Do It To Me One More Time" by Lionel Richie. First on my list, laundry. Carrying the basket of clothes to the laundry room, I bent over to separate the whites from the colors, methodically pulling delicate fabrics from rougher ones. The music filled the house, drowning out the sound of Daniel entering the room. I didn't hear him, didn't sense him standing there watching. But later, after everything had unraveled, when I asked what had been going through his mind in that moment, he told me simply, "I wanted you, and I knew I would go mad if I didn't have you." After what felt like minutes of my unintentional swaying to the rhythm, Daniel moved closer. His presence became undeniable as his hands suddenly gripped my waist. I gasped, but before I could protest, his lips were near my ear, his voice a soothing whisper. "No need to shout. It's just me." And that was it. I was undone. I had never heard his voice like that before. Deep, velvety, intoxicating. Perhaps I had, but at that moment it felt like music, like something forbidden yet irresistible. I could feel his breath, his warmth pressing against my back, his strength caging me in. And there it was, a tension I had ignored for too long, now impossible to deny. "Daniel," I murmured, forcing myself to say something, anything. "What do you think you're doing? Do you want Ethan to find out?" Daniel said he was probably in a meeting somewhere, trying to persuade yet another investor to buy shares in his company, his ridiculous, overvalued company. I should have pushed him away. I should have fought against the thrill that coursed through me, but my voice betrayed me. I didn't sound alarmed. I sounded intrigued. I had unknowingly issued a challenge, and he had accepted it. And as expected, he didn't stop. "So what do you want? Why are you holding me like this?" I asked, my voice carrying both protest and invitation. I could feel his arousal pressing against me, igniting something deep inside me. "Please let me go," I murmured, though I shifted slightly, pressing back against him, teasing. His desire was undeniable, growing harder by the second. The urge to reach out to claim him, to make this moment mine, was overwhelming. "I want you just as much as you want me. No, I want you even more." My voice was breathless, my resolve slipping. I turned to meet his gaze, and what I saw made my pulse race. His eyes were dark with desire, filled with the promise of pleasure before the real pleasure had even begun. Without warning, he pulled me roughly against him, just the way I liked it, and captured my lips in a kiss so intoxicating that I almost lost myself completely. I fought it. I resisted, even though every fiber of my being ached for him. "I can't," I whispered against his lips, my breath mingling with his. "I won't do this to my husband." Daniel smiled knowingly, as if he had anticipated my struggle, as if he had prepared for this very moment. He pulled me close again. "Stop," I said, my voice weak, betraying me. It sounded more like an invitation than a command. Daniel understood. He pressed forward, his lips hovering near mine, teasing me with the anticipation of another kiss. I was locked in place, trapped in his presence, my breath coming in shallow gasps. We stared at each other, neither of us breaking, neither of us willing to surrender or step away. Finally, hesitantly, he reached for me again. This time there was uncertainty in his touch, a flicker of restraint. He kissed me, slow, deliberate, testing my resolve. I did not move. I did not pull away. Though I knew I should, I couldn't. His lips were impossibly soft, his touch gentle yet commanding. I closed my eyes and let myself sink into the moment, into him, but not too far, not yet. Doubts clouded my mind. What if Ethan came home? What if he didn't? What if I enjoyed this too much? What if Daniel awakened something in me I couldn't put back to sleep? The garage was darker than usual that day, the sky heavy with clouds. And then, as if on cue, the rain began to pour. The rhythmic tapping against the roof matched the erratic pounding of my heart. Daniel was still consuming me, taking every inch of my lips, my breath, my will, when suddenly I found the strength to push him away. "We can't do this," I gasped. "Ethan is your step-grandfather. We have to stop now and pretend like this never happened." Daniel didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He simply looked at me with the confidence of a man who knew what he wanted and had the patience to wait for it. We sat down on the cold garage floor, the air between us thick with tension. My eyes flickered downward, catching the evidence of his need pressing against his shorts. A heavy silence settled, filled with longing. Then Daniel stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'll get us something to drink," he said, before disappearing into the house. I wanted to follow, but I was frozen in place, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. When he returned, he carried 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey. He poured the golden liquid, handing me a glass. I downed it in one gulp, desperate for anything to quiet the storm inside me. Daniel sipped his smoothie, watching me. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice even. I shrugged, grabbed the bottle, and poured myself another glass, downing it just as quickly. Daniel narrowed his eyes. He knew exactly what I was doing. He took the bottle away before I could drink more. "I don't want you drunk," he murmured. "I want you aware. I want you innocent enough to choose me." God, I wanted that too. The silence returned, heavier this time, thick with anticipation. He moved closer, his warmth drawing me in despite myself. The garage was cold now, the storm outside sending a chill through the air, but neither of us made a move to leave. We sat there, wrapped in the tension, in the dangerous heat between us. Then Daniel leaned in again. This time, I didn't resist. The taste of whiskey lingered on our tongues as our lips met, fusing, igniting something raw and uncontrollable. The kiss deepened, turning desperate, turning wild, like two people who had just discovered they could. Before I knew it, his hands were roaming, exploring. The thin black nightgown I wore offered no resistance, granting him easy access to my most sensitive places. His fingers found my nipples, teasing, kneading, until he took one into his mouth, his tongue flicking, drawing out a sound I barely recognized as my own. I arched into him, giving silent permission, silent encouragement. Daniel groaned against my skin. "God, you taste incredible." He moved to the other, twisting, teasing, coaxing pleasure out of me in ways I had never known, not even with Ethan. Ethan was predictable, routine. Daniel was something else entirely. Men come and go, following the same predictable rhythm, back and forth, seeking their moment of triumph before moving on. But Daniel was different. He understood a woman's body in a way that was almost primal, taking his time to claim every inch of me as if he were learning a language only we spoke. I had thought the peak of pleasure was reached when his lips teased my nipples, but then he went lower, and suddenly my world exploded into a symphony of sensation, fireworks bursting like the 4th of July. I was ready to surrender, to lose myself in the waves of euphoria washing over me. Then, just as my body was about to unravel, I heard the unmistakable sound of Ethan's car pulling into the driveway. For 2 long, excruciating minutes, my mind was a battlefield of confusion. Daniel had to steady me, whispering calm into my chaos. By the time I made it to the door, my pulse was still hammering against my ribs, my body still thrumming with the remnants of his touch. Ethan walked in, oblivious, his focus locked onto something else entirely, an important file he had forgotten for his meeting. Without so much as a glance in my direction, he headed straight for his study. I followed, watching him sift through stacks of paperwork, his mind consumed with the weight of his responsibilities. Ethan was a perfect man, an unwavering provider, a dedicated husband, a man who spent every waking moment striving to build a better life for us. But in doing so, he had forgotten to enjoy the life he had already built. And then there was Daniel, his exact opposite. Dishonorably discharged from the army, he had nowhere else to go. So Ethan, ever the savior, had taken him in, promising to find him work to help him get back on his feet. Ethan finally found his file, pressing a distracted kiss to my cheek before heading back to his car. I watched him drive away, guilt clawing at my chest. This wasn't right. I couldn't do this to a man as perfect as Ethan. Resolute, I turned and made my way to the garage where Daniel waited, leaning against the workbench, his gaze dark and knowing. I opened my mouth, ready to tell him it was over, that whatever had ignited between us had to be extinguished. But before I could form the words, he was on me. His hand wrapped around my throat, pulling me into a kiss that was all lips, tongue, and unspoken hunger. And just like that, every shred of resolve I had vanished. He dropped to his knees, his mouth tracing a path down my body, his fingers parting me with expert precision. Daniel took a long, shuddering breath, his eyes locked onto mine, his voice a reverent whisper. Finally, this rose is mine. And then he took me, soft, slow, deliberate, like a butterfly sipping nectar. My name slipped from my lips, breathless, pleading. I clutched his head, holding him there, unwilling to let him come up for air, unwilling to let this moment slip away. I had heard women speak of this feeling before, this indescribable bliss that seemed like myth. But not until Daniel did I finally understand. My legs trembled as a storm of pleasure built inside me, rising higher, cresting. "Daniel!" I gasped, my breath coming in ragged, desperate bursts, my body spiraling out of control. I tried to suppress the moan threatening to escape, tried to ground myself, but it was too late. A final tremor surged through me, and I shattered, my body convulsing in his arms, his name falling from my lips like a prayer. I collapsed onto the cold garage floor, wrapped around him, my arms and legs locked in a tangle of surrender. My mind floated somewhere between reality and delirium, and yet I knew this wasn't the end. Not even close. Daniel reached for his toy, and with the first stroke, the world around me disappeared. I was no longer just a woman. I was part of something celestial, something untamed and infinite. Stars, galaxies, and constellations swirled behind my closed eyes. Each movement, each deep thrust, wove me to the fabric of the universe itself. My body arched to meet his, each stroke carving his name into my soul. He wanted me to watch, to see him claim me, to see myself unravel beneath him. I opened my eyes, looked down, and saw it. The transformation, the collision of two bodies becoming something raw, something irreversible. It was like witnessing the sky after a storm, the beauty of a rainbow breaking through endless gray. Then the rhythm changed. Daniel had finished remaking me. Now he would make me his. He turned me over, his movements shifting from measured strokes to something deeper, something that held both fury and devotion. He took me with an intensity that bordered on savage, his hands gripping me with possessive finality. My voice, hoarse from cries of pleasure, called his name over and over, each syllable a different melody, a different cadence. I was his and he was mine, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Daniel then came, and once again my legs began to tremble. I couldn't help it, my knees buckled like overcooked noodles, and the shouting followed. He let me express myself fully, without restraint, without shame, and when I thought I had reached my limit, he continued, drawing out the pleasure, making it sharper, deeper, more intense. Each thrust sent a fresh wave of sensation through me, each movement of his body against mine making the pleasure more tangible, more undeniable. Then, I think it's more than 10 times more, It felt like an eternity, like time itself had unraveled, and then Daniel let out a primal scream. I did too. It was perfectly timed, an unspoken harmony between us. He spilled inside me, and I didn't mind. He collapsed onto me, our bodies still entwined, and I held him, feeling no guilt, no regret, only the warmth of his skin and the steady rise and fall of his chest against mine. He stole breaths from me, and I took his in return. That day, on the cold garage floor, we became one. My black nightgown still clung to me, though barely, the fabric torn and damp with sweat. Daniel stood first, then lay beside me with a conquering smile on his face. I knew what it meant. Victory. He had claimed me wholly and completely. For the next 20 minutes we said nothing. We simply basked in the aftermath, letting our bodies rest, letting the weight of what had just happened settle into our bones. Then I stood and he followed. As I turned to leave, his hand shot out, pulling me back against him. His lips crashed into mine, demanding, possessive. I needed it. I melted into him, letting his warmth consume me again. We stayed like that for another 10 minutes, wrapped in silence, in desire, in something unspoken yet understood. Then finally, he released me. I walked to the bathroom, my steps unsteady, my body still thrumming from the pleasure he had given me. I let the warm water cascade over me, washing away the remnants of our union, but not the memory. No, that was seared into my skin, my mind, my soul. I bit my lower lip, smiling as I let myself relive it. The garage floor, the heat of his breath, the way he had taught me the language of the world without uttering a single word. I stayed in the shower longer than usual, lost in the moment, unwilling to let it go. When I finally stepped out, I slipped into one of my stay-at-home gowns, something flimsy and comfortable. The afternoon sun was already high in the sky, and I realized with a small laugh that I had done nothing on my to-do list. The laundry was untouched, the housework ignored. Who cares? Not me. Instead, I went to the kitchen, my body still humming with satisfaction, and prepared something for Daniel to eat. He deserved it. After everything, he deserved it. When the food was ready, I made my way back to the garage, tossing the unwashed clothes into the laundry basket on my way. Today was my Independence Day, and I intended to enjoy every second of it. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the same smile from my shower still firmly in place. Lionel Richie's "Do It To Me One More Time" played through the speakers, filling the house with its sultry rhythm. I swayed to the music, my body moving in slow, lazy circles, cradling the glass of whiskey as if it were another lover. Daniel watched me from across the room, his eyes dark with satisfaction. When he finished eating, he joined me in the living room, his hands finding their way to my hips, then lower. We danced together, his grip firm, his touch possessive, and I loved it. I loved every second of it, every stolen moment of that day. Time waltzed by, teasing, fleeting, slipping through our fingers, and then, all too soon, reality knocked on the door. Ethan's car pulled into the driveway. I sighed, steadying myself. It was time to return to my world, to step back into my role, but this reality had been altered, painted in the colors of pleasure and discovery, and I intended to hold on to that magic for as long as I could. Ethan stepped inside, his eyes landing on my face, and I knew he saw it. The glow, the smile I couldn't quite hide. He must have thought I had forgiven him for last night, for leaving me aching and alone. I had. I had forgiven him all his transgressions, had washed them away with Daniel's touch, with the sin we had committed and would commit again. I had cleansed his sins with pleasure, made them white as snow. Ethan gave me a weak hug, his lips grazing my flushed cheek before he retreated to the bedroom. I followed, as I always did. He undressed, stepping into the shower, all the while talking about the contract he had won and what it meant for us. I listened, or at least I tried to, but my mind had already drifted to the garage floor, to the hands that had unraveled me, to the place called Nirvana where Daniel had taken me and left me breathless. I lingered there too long, lost in the memory, until Ethan's voice pulled me back. "Honey, are you okay?" I blinked, startled out of my trance. "Yes, dear," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm just so excited for you." And I was, but not for Ethan. I was excited for tomorrow, for the promise of being alone with Daniel once more. I could hardly sleep that night, anticipation thrumming beneath my skin. When Ethan climbed on top of me, I closed my eyes, picturing Daniel instead. It was a long wait for morning, but I waited patiently. And when the sun finally rose, it was the happiest sunrise I had ever seen. Hello, my name is Emily, and I need to share something I've kept inside for too long. Before you judge me, please listen to my story. I never imagined I'd find myself in such a situation, and even now, I struggle to understand how everything spiraled out of control so quickly. It's a memory that has haunted me for years, something my husband Mark forced me into, changing my life forever. It all started a few years ago. Mark and I had been married for nearly a decade. Like most couples, we had our share of ups and downs, but nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. Mark had always been a kind and loving husband, but over time something shifted. He became distant, more controlling, and less affectionate. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just the stress from work, but deep down I knew something was wrong. One evening, Mark came home from work with an unusual energy about him. He seemed almost too cheerful, but there was an unsettling glint in his eyes. We had dinner as usual, and just as I was about to clear the dishes, he asked me to sit down. His serious tone made my heart race. I could feel something was coming. "I've been thinking," he started, avoiding my gaze. "There's something I need to share with you." I nodded, waiting for him to continue, but the words that followed were not what I had expected. He told me he wanted to try something different to spice up our marriage, that he'd been feeling bored and thought it was time for a change. I assumed he meant a romantic getaway or even couples therapy, but what he suggested was something else entirely. "I've arranged for us to meet two men," he said bluntly. "They're coming over this weekend." I stared at him, confused, not understanding what he was implying. Was this a joke? A test? But the serious expression on his face made my stomach churn. What do you mean, 2 men? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They're friends of mine, he continued, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. We're going to spend the night with them. My hands trembled as I tried to process his words.